I'm sitting in the back pew of the church, alone, with the funeral home fan in my hand. Everyone's gone. The priest has locked up the front. And I'm holding this paper fan, staring at the advertisement on the back like it might tell me something I don't know. 10 years. It's been 10 years since I buried my husband, and I just found out at a court hearing that I never knew him at all. God, where do I even start with this? I mean, I've never told anyone the whole thing. Not my sister, not my kids. But something happened last month that changed everything, and I think people need to hear what happens when you love someone so much that you stop loving yourself. My name is Margaret. I'm 71 years old, and I spent 43 years married to a man who was stealing from me while I was washing his clothes. That's not dramatic. That's just the truth. If you've ever felt like maybe you're the problem, like maybe you're too sensitive or too forgetful or too demanding, I want you to stay with me through this story. Because what I'm about to tell you might sound impossible, but it happened. And maybe sharing it will help someone else see what I couldn't see for so long. If this story touches something in you, please leave a like or subscribe. Not for me, but so this message can reach someone out there who needs to hear it as badly as I needed to hear it years ago. Let me back up. This is going to sound backwards, but it makes sense if you know how we ended up here in Boston, in this rural part with the mobile homes and wide open sky. I grew up here, and when Robert and I got married, we came back. We bought this 2-story row house with the narrow backyard and that clothesline I still use. I love that clothesline. There's something about hanging wet sheets in the spring air that makes you feel like you're doing something right, even when everything else is falling apart. I spent my working days wearing a forest green dress. That was my uniform at the hospital, 40 years as a nurse's aide. People trusted me with their parents, their grandparents, their sick children. I was good at being trusted. That's the problem, you know? I was so good at it that I never questioned it at home. Robert was. He was charming. He had this way of making you feel like whatever he said was the only truth that mattered. When I'd notice something off, like when money went missing from my purse, or when bills weren't paid even though I'd given him the checks, he'd explain it in a way that made me feel crazy for asking. He'd say things like, "You're forgetting again, Margaret. I already paid that." Or, "Why are you trying to make me the bad guy?" And I'd believe him. I'd actually believe that my own memory was wrong. The ceramic cookie jar shaped like a house has been sitting on my kitchen counter since we moved into that row house. I used to fill it every Sunday with chocolate chip cookies for Robert. He'd take one every morning with his coffee, and I'd watch him feeling useful, feeling needed. That jar became a symbol of what a good wife I was, what a loyal wife I was. But loyalty isn't the same as love when it costs you everything. I believed that a wife's job was to keep the family together, no matter what. My parents had done the same thing. My mother swallowed her hurt so deep she stopped talking about it altogether. So I did the same. Robert would lie about where he'd been, who he was with, what he'd done with money. And I just accepted it. I forgave him before he even asked. I never said no to anything he wanted. I gave up my boundaries so completely that I forgot I ever had them. The sacrifice wasn't just money, though God knows there was plenty of that. It was my voice. It was my right to question anything. It was the life I could have had if I'd trusted myself more than I trusted him. I remember sitting at that kitchen table on spring mornings, windows finally open after the long Boston winter, doing crossword puzzles while Robert slept late. I'd hear the birds outside and feel this strange ache in my chest, like I was supposed to be somewhere else, like I was supposed to be someone else. But I'd push that feeling down and make deviled eggs for lunch, covering them in plastic wrap the way Robert liked, arranging them on the plate just so. I gave him everything. When his business was struggling in the 80s, I took extra shifts at the hospital. When he said we couldn't afford to visit my sister in Maine, I canceled the trip and never mentioned it again. When he forgot my birthday 3 years in a row, I told myself birthdays didn't matter at our age anyway. I went to church every Sunday, sitting in the third pew from the front, fanning myself with that paper church fan with the funeral home advertisement on the back. I prayed for patience. I prayed for understanding. I prayed to be a better wife. It never occurred to me to pray for the strength to leave. My hobby was those crossword puzzles. I'd sit there filling in the little squares, and it was the only time my brain felt like it belonged to me. 7 letters for betrayal, 6 letters for lonely, 5 letters for wrong. But I never filled those in. I stuck to the easy words, the safe words. Robert would come home late sometimes, and I'd smell perfume that wasn't mine. But when I asked, he'd look at me with such disappointment. "Margaret, I was at a client dinner. You're being paranoid again." And I'd apologize. I'd actually apologize for noticing. The pattern went on for years, decades. I forgave endlessly. I never said no. When he asked for my paycheck, I handed it over. When he said we needed to put the house in his name only for tax purposes, I signed the papers. When he told me my memory was failing and I shouldn't trust myself anymore, I believed him. That's what sacrifice looks like when it goes too far. It looks like a woman sitting at a kitchen table, filling in crossword puzzles, convincing herself that this is what love is supposed to feel like. Then Robert got sick. It was his heart. Ironic, I know. He was in his 60s, and suddenly he was the one who needed me. And I was there. Of course I was there. I quit some of my hours at the hospital. I brought him deviled eggs in bed. I refilled that ceramic cookie jar even though he couldn't eat them anymore. The loneliness during that time was crushing. He was there in the house with me, but he wasn't really there. He'd snap at me when I brought his medication. He'd ignore me when I tried to talk. And on the days when I was exhausted, when my back hurt from lifting him and my hands shook from lack of sleep, he'd tell me I wasn't doing enough. My birthday came and went that year. No card, no acknowledgement. I sat at the kitchen table with my crossword puzzle and cried into my coffee. Then his sister came over one afternoon. Sarah. She'd always been kind to me, but distant. She brought a casserole and stayed for tea. I remember she kept looking at me with this expression I couldn't read. Pity, maybe, or guilt. "Margaret," she said, stirring her tea slowly, "has Robert talked to you about his finances?" I felt my stomach drop. "What do you mean?" She looked away. "Nothing. Never mind." But I pressed. For the first time in 40 years, I pressed. "Sarah, what are you talking about?" She left without answering, but that question sat in my chest like a stone. Robert died 2 months later. It was a spring morning, windows open, the smell of fresh air coming through the house. He went peacefully in his sleep. Everyone came to the funeral, the whole church. People cried for Robert. I cried too, but I was also relieved, and that guilt just ate me alive. I buried him. I wore black for 2 years. I kept his things exactly as he'd left them. The ceramic cookie jar stayed on the counter, empty now, but I couldn't bring myself to move it. That was my punishment, I think, keeping everything the same because I didn't deserve to move forward. The house felt enormous without him. I'd walk through those rooms and see 43 years of my life scattered everywhere. His reading glasses on the side table, his coat still hanging by the door, the smell of his cologne fading slowly from the closet. The silence was the worst part. For over 4 decades, there had always been noise. Robert's footsteps on the stairs, the sound of him clearing his throat in the morning, the television playing his programs. Now there was nothing but the creaking of old floorboards and the hum of the refrigerator. Sometimes I'd catch myself listening for him, waiting for him to call my name from the other room. Then I'd remember he was gone, and the grief would hit me all over again, mixed with something else I couldn't quite name. Relief, guilt, Freedom? I started noticing things I'd ignored before. Bills piling up, notices from the bank. A letter from an insurance company addressed to me, but opened and resealed. The envelope was wrinkled, as if someone had opened it carefully, read the contents, then tried to make it look untouched. My hands shook when I held it. I stood there in the kitchen, afternoon light streaming through the window, and I could feel my heartbeat in my throat. Part of me wanted to throw it away without reading it. Part of me already knew that whatever was inside would change everything. I opened it slowly. Inside was a statement about a policy I'd never heard of. A life insurance policy in my name, with a payout of $200,000. $200,000. I read those numbers over and over, trying to make sense of them. I sat down at the kitchen table, the letter trembling in my hands. When had this been opened? Why had Robert opened mail addressed to me? I thought back to all the times he'd collected the mail before I got home from work. All the times he'd said he'd handle the bills because I was too tired. All the times he'd told me I didn't need to worry about finances. But according to this statement, the policy had been cashed out over the years, little by little, until there was almost nothing left. Withdrawals dating back 15 years, 20,000 here, 30,000 there, always with Robert's signature as the beneficiary, never with mine as the insured who should have known about it. My breath came in short gasps. I felt like I was drowning in my own kitchen. I stood there in my narrow backyard, hanging sheets on the clothesline, and I felt the world tilt. Who had done this? Robert. But he was dead. How could a dead man steal from me? I called the insurance company. They told me the policy had been opened 20 years ago, with me as the insured and Robert as the beneficiary. He'd been making withdrawals against it for years. Legal withdrawals, they said. He had every right, but I'd never signed anything. I'd never known it existed. That's when Sarah called. 5 years after Robert's funeral, she called and asked to come over. Her voice on the phone was tight, nervous. She said she needed to talk to me about something important, something she should have told me a long time ago. I made tea. The same tea I'd always made for guests, chamomile with honey, served in the porcelain cups that had been my mother's. We sat at the kitchen table. Sarah couldn't meet my eyes. She kept stirring her tea, round and round, the spoon clinking against the cup in a rhythm that made my nerves scream. "Margaret," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to tell you something. I should have told you years ago, but Robert, he made me promise. He said it would destroy you if you knew." The room seemed to tilt. I set down my cup carefully, afraid I'd drop it. "Knew what?" She took a shaky breath. "The insurance policy. He took it out in your name without telling you. He'd been pulling money from it for years." My mouth went dry. "For what? For bills?" "Not just for bills, Margaret." She finally looked at me, and I saw the guilt etched in every line of her face. For other things. For a woman he was seeing. Her name was Christine. He took her to Florida 3 times. He bought her jewelry. He paid her rent for over a year. The words hit me like physical blows. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "And there were trips," Sarah continued, her voice breaking. "Trips I didn't know about until after he died. Atlantic City, New York. Places he told you he was going for work. He was spending your money, Margaret. Money from a policy he took out in your name. Money you should have had for your retirement." The kitchen went silent. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. I could hear my own heartbeat. I could hear Sarah crying softly across from me. "You knew?" I finally whispered. "All this time, you knew?" She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to tell you. He swore me to secrecy. He said if I told you, it would kill you, that you'd have a heart attack or you'd leave him and be alone. And he said..." She paused, wiping her eyes. He said you'd never believe me anyway, that you trusted him too much, that you'd choose him over the truth. I stared at her. This woman I'd considered a sister for 43 years. This woman who'd come to Christmas dinners and birthday parties and hospital visits. This woman who'd hugged me at Robert's funeral and told me what a good wife I'd been. "Get out," I said quietly. "Margaret, please, get out of my house." I stood up from that table and walked to the bathroom. I turned on the light, and I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw a 71-year-old woman who had been erased. My own reflection shocked me. The lines around my mouth from years of pressing my lips together instead of speaking. The exhaustion in my eyes. The way I stood, shoulders curved inward like I was trying to disappear. How had I let this happen? How had I spent 43 years with a man who was stealing not just money, but my reality itself? I collapsed right there on the bathroom floor, not dramatically, just sank down slowly and sat there, back against the tub, staring at the tile. And I cried. I cried for the woman in the mirror who'd given up everything and gotten nothing but lies in return. When I finally got up from that bathroom floor, I called my daughter, Linda. She'd always been the practical one. She came over that evening and found me still sitting at the kitchen table with Sarah's words echoing in my head. "Mom, what's wrong?" Linda asked, sitting down across from me. I told her everything about the insurance policy, about Robert's theft, about Sarah's confession. And I watched my daughter's face cycle through shock, anger, and then something that looked almost like relief. "Mom, I need to tell you something too," she said quietly. "Dad called me 3 years before he died. He asked me to co-sign on a loan, said it was for the house, that you knew about it. I signed it because he was my dad and I trusted him. But after he died, I found out the loan was for something else. I don't even know what. And when I tried to talk to you about it, he'd already told you I was going through financial trouble and needed help. He made you think you were helping me when really..." She couldn't finish, but I understood. Robert had manipulated both of us. He'd used our love for each other as a weapon. My son called the next day. Then Robert's brother. Then his old business partner. One by one, they came forward with their pieces of the truth. Robert had been playing everyone, taking money here, making promises there, building a web of lies so complex that none of us could see the whole picture until he was gone. His brother told me Robert had convinced him to invest in a business that never existed. His business partner revealed that Robert had been skimming off their accounts for years. Even the woman Robert had been seeing, she reached out through a mutual friend. She'd had no idea he was married. He'd told her his wife had died years ago. Each revelation felt like another blow. But what hurt most wasn't Robert's lies. It was realizing how many people had known pieces of the truth and said nothing. How many people had chosen to protect him instead of protecting me. Linda sat with me through those conversations. She held my hand when I cried. And when I was done crying, she said something that changed everything. "Mom, you need to talk to someone professional, not just family. Someone who can help you understand what happened and what you can do about it." That's how I met David. He was a social worker at the senior center downtown. I took the bus there one morning, wearing my old forest green dress because it was the only thing that still fit right, and I sat in his office and told him everything. David didn't look shocked. He didn't tell me I should have known better. He just listened. And when I was done, he said, "Margaret, what you're describing is financial abuse. It's also psychological abuse, and it's more common than you think." He explained gaslighting to me, how abusers make you doubt your own reality, how they isolate you from other sources of truth until their version is the only one you can see, how they use your loyalty and love as tools to control you. "But he's dead," I said. "What can I even do about it now?" "You can hold his estate accountable," David said. "You can file complaints. You can demand restitution. You have rights, Margaret, even now. I left that office feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Anger. Clean, clear, righteous anger. David connected me with a lawyer named Patricia. She was younger than me, sharp as a tack, and she didn't waste time with sympathy. She wanted facts, documents, evidence. I brought her everything I had, every bank statement I could find, every letter, every piece of mail that had been opened and hidden away. Patricia spent 2 weeks going through it all. Then she called me into her office and laid it out. Margaret, your husband committed financial fraud. The insurance policy alone is grounds for a lawsuit against his estate. But there's more. He forged your signature on multiple documents. He opened credit cards in your name. He took out loans using your income as collateral without your knowledge. This isn't just theft. This is systematic, long-term financial abuse. I felt sick. Can we prove it? We can try, Patricia said. But I need you to understand something. This is going to be hard. His family will fight back. They'll try to protect his reputation. They'll say you're lying or confused or trying to take advantage. Are you prepared for that? I thought about the ceramic cookie jar on my counter. I thought about 43 years of deviled eggs wrapped in plastic. I thought about every birthday he forgot, every lie he told, every time he made me feel crazy for questioning him. Yes, I said, I'm prepared. The first step was gathering statements from everyone who'd been affected. Linda agreed to testify about the loan. Robert's business partner came forward with records of the money Robert had taken. Even Sarah, despite her guilt, agreed to sign an affidavit about what she knew. But Robert's other sister, Diane, she was furious. She called me a liar. She said I was trying to destroy her brother's memory. She rallied some of his old friends to her side, and suddenly I was getting calls. Angry calls. Calls telling me to let it go, to stop embarrassing the family, to remember my place. I stopped answering the phone. I focused on the work. Patricia filed the paperwork. We scheduled a court hearing. And I started preparing myself for what was coming. One evening, I took the bus somewhere I'd never been before. Just got on the number 42 and rode it to the end of the line. It was a part of Boston I'd only driven through before, never really seen. I got off and walked around. There was a small park with benches and a pond. I sat there with my plastic container of deviled eggs that I'd made out of habit, and I watched the ducks. A woman about my age sat down next to me. We didn't talk at first, then she said, "Those look good." I offered her one. She took it. We sat there eating deviled eggs and watching the ducks, and for the first time in months, I felt something close to peace. "I'm starting over," I said, not sure why I was telling her. She nodded. "Me too. It's never too late, you know." I went home that night and did something I hadn't done in years. I moved the ceramic cookie jar. I picked it up, walked it to the basement, and put it on a shelf where I wouldn't have to see it every day. It felt like removing a weight from my chest. The court hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday in March. Spring was coming early that year, windows open all over the neighborhood, people starting to come back to life after winter. I wore the forest green dress. Patricia said I should look professional, but not too formal. I wanted to look like myself. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Robert's family was there. Diane sat in the front row, glaring at me. Linda sat on my side, her hand ready to grab mine if I needed it. Patricia sat at the table, papers spread out in front of her. The judge was a woman, probably in her 50s, with a kind face but sharp eyes. She listened to Patricia present the case. She looked through the documents, and then she asked if anyone wanted to speak. Diane stood up. "Your Honor, my brother was a good man. He worked hard his whole life. This woman is trying to destroy his reputation because she's angry and confused. She's elderly. She doesn't understand finances. Robert took care of everything because she couldn't." I felt Linda's hand tighten around mine. Then Sarah stood up. "Your Honor, I need to say something. My brother did these things. I knew about them. And I stayed silent because he was my brother and I was afraid. But Margaret is telling the truth. I saw the documents. I knew about the insurance policy. And I should have said something years ago. The courtroom went silent. Diane's face turned red. I could see her shaking with anger. The judge asked me if I wanted to speak. I stood up, legs trembling. Your Honor, I loved my husband. I gave him 43 years of my life. But he lied to me. He stole from me. And he made me think I was crazy when I questioned him. I'm not here to destroy his reputation. I'm here because I need people to understand that this happens, that loyal women get taken advantage of, that trust can be a weapon, and that even after someone dies, the truth still matters. I sat down. My whole body was shaking. The judge took a recess. We waited for 2 hours. When she came back, her face was serious. I've reviewed the evidence presented, she said, and I find that there is sufficient proof of financial fraud and abuse. I'm ordering restitution from Mr. Thompson's estate to Mrs. Thompson in the amount of $137,000, representing the funds improperly withdrawn from the insurance policy plus interest. Additionally, I'm ordering that any jointly held assets be transferred to Mrs. Thompson's name only, and that any debts fraudulently incurred in her name be voided. I couldn't breathe. Patricia was smiling. Linda was crying. Diane stormed out of the courtroom, but I just sat there, feeling something I couldn't name. Not quite relief, not quite victory, just acknowledgement. Someone with authority had looked at my life and said, "You're right, this happened to you, and it was wrong." That afternoon, I went back to my row house. I stood in the kitchen and looked at that empty space where the cookie jar used to be, and I felt something shift inside me. Like a door that had been locked for decades was finally opening. I took the bus the next day, number 42, to the end of the line and back, just to see it. Just to remind myself that I could go somewhere new without asking permission. 2 weeks after the hearing, everything fell apart in a different way. I got a call from a woman named Jennifer. She said she was a journalist working on a story about financial abuse in elderly populations, and she'd heard about my case. She wanted to interview me. I almost said no, but something in her voice made me trust her. We met at a coffee shop downtown. She was younger than my daughter, with a recorder and a notebook full of questions. "Mrs. Thompson, can you tell me what it was like living with your husband's abuse for all those years?" she asked. I told her. I told her everything. About the gaslighting, about the forgotten birthdays and the stolen money, and the way he made me feel like I was losing my mind. About the loyalty I'd mistaken for love. About the boundaries I'd sacrificed until I didn't have any left. Jennifer listened without interrupting. When I was done, she said, "I'm going to write about this. And I want to be very clear, this isn't just about you. This is about a pattern. I've been researching your husband's life, and I've found other women. At least 3 others who he had relationships with while you were married. Women he promised things to. Women he took money from." My stomach turned. 3 others? She nodded, and they all described the same pattern. Charm, manipulation, gaslighting, financial control. You weren't the only victim, Mrs. Thompson. You were just the one who stayed the longest. I went home that day and threw up. Not from shock, from rage, from the realization that I'd wasted 43 years on a man who'd been running the same con on multiple women at the same time. The article came out a month later. It was on the front page of the local section, with my picture and my story. The headline read, "Local Woman Wins Court Battle Against Dead Husband's Financial Fraud." My phone didn't stop ringing for days. Some calls were supportive. Old friends from the hospital, neighbors I hadn't talked to in years, people telling me I was brave. But some calls were vicious. Robert's family, his old colleagues, people who believed I was a bitter old woman trying to ruin a dead man's legacy. Diane left a voicemail that made my blood run cold. You've destroyed this family, Margaret. I hope you're happy. Robert was a good man, and you've turned him into a monster for money. You're pathetic. I saved that voicemail. I saved it because it was proof of what David had warned me about. The enablers, the people who protect abusers because it's easier than facing the truth. That night, I had a moment of doubt. I sat at my kitchen table, doing a crossword puzzle, and I thought maybe I'd made a mistake. Maybe I should have just let it go. Let Robert rest in peace. Let the family stay intact. But then I remembered the woman at the park who told me it's never too late to start over. And I remembered the judge's words. This happened to you, and it was wrong. I called Patricia the next morning. What else can we do? I asked. She paused. What do you mean? I mean, if there are other victims, can we help them too? Can we make sure Robert's estate pays for all of it, not just what he did to me? Patricia was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Margaret, you're talking about opening up a much bigger case. It could take years. It could get uglier than it already is. Are you sure? I thought about those 3 other women Jennifer had found. I thought about how many more there might be. I thought about the pattern of abuse that Robert had perfected over decades. I'm sure, I said. The extended investigation took 8 months. Patricia worked with Jennifer and David to track down every woman Robert had been involved with, every business deal he'd made, every lie he'd told. We found 7 women in total. 7 women who'd been promised marriage or money or security. 7 women who'd been left with nothing but debt and broken hearts. Not all of them wanted to come forward. Some were too ashamed. Some were afraid of their own families finding out. But 3 of them agreed to join the case. Their names were Susan, Andrea, and Marie. We met once, all 4 of us, at Patricia's office. It was awkward at first. We sat in chairs arranged in a circle. 4 women who never should have had to meet, bound together by the same man's deception. I looked at their faces and saw my own pain reflected back at me. Different ages, different backgrounds, but the same haunted look in our eyes. Patricia had coffee and tissues ready. She knew what was coming. We started with introductions, names, ages, how we'd met Robert. It felt surreal, like some twisted support group. We were all victims of the same man, all connected by the same betrayal. But slowly, carefully, we started talking, comparing stories. And as we did, a pattern emerged so clear it made me sick. Susan went first. She was younger than me, maybe in her early 60s, with careful makeup that couldn't quite hide how tired she looked. He told me his wife had Alzheimer's, she said, her voice steady, but her hands shaking. He said Margaret didn't even remember who he was anymore, that she lived in a care facility and he visited every weekend out of duty. That's why he couldn't leave her. He was too honorable, he said, too loyal. I felt something twist in my stomach. While I was at home making his dinner, he was with Susan, painting me as a tragic figure who'd forgotten him, using my supposed illness as a reason to seem noble. Andrea spoke next. She was tall, elegant, probably in her 50s, a professional woman who carried herself with confidence that I envied. He told me he was divorced, she said. I met him at a business conference in New York. We were together for 2 years before I found out the truth. He had a whole story about his ex-wife, about the bitter divorce, about how she'd turned his kids against him. I believed every word. I even felt sorry for him. She paused, looking at me with something like apology in her eyes. I'm sorry, Margaret. I didn't know you were real. I didn't know any of it was a lie. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Marie was last. She was closer to my age, maybe late 60s, and she looked like she'd been wealthy once, but had fallen on hard times. He borrowed $60,000 from me, she said quietly. For a business venture. He had spreadsheets, projections, the whole presentation, promised me double back in 6 months. We were involved. Not seriously, just he made me feel seen, you know? After my husband died, I was so lonely. Robert was charming and attentive, and he seemed to really care. She laughed bitterly. I never saw a penny. When I asked about it, he'd get angry. Tell me I was being pushy, that these things took time. Eventually, he just stopped returning my calls. I found out later he'd blocked my number. I sat there listening, and I felt this strange mix of grief and solidarity. We were all mourning the same ghost. We were all angry at the same lie. But more than that, we were all realizing how perfectly he'd played us, how he'd tailored his deception to each of our vulnerabilities, to Susan's compassion, to Andrea's trust, to Marie's loneliness, to my loyalty. He knew exactly what to say. I finally spoke, my voice rough. He knew exactly what each of us needed to hear. What would keep us hooked? What would make us stay silent or complicit or blind? The others nodded. Susan wiped her eyes. Andrea stared at her hands. Marie looked like she might be sick. I spent 43 years with him, I continued, and I didn't know him at all. None of us did. We all loved different versions of the same liar. The second court hearing was bigger, more lawyers, more family members, more media. The judge was the same woman, and she looked exhausted before we even started. Patricia presented the new evidence. The other women testified. Bank records were shown. Emails were read aloud. It was brutal. Robert's family sat in the front row, crying and angry, insisting we were all lying. But then something unexpected happened. Robert's old accountant stood up. His name was George, and he'd worked with Robert for 30 years. He said, "Your Honor, I need to confess something. I helped Robert hide money. He told me it was for tax purposes, that it was all legal, but I knew it wasn't, and I did it anyway because he was my friend. I'm sorry." The courtroom went silent. Even Diane looked shocked. The judge took another recess. When she came back, she looked directly at me. "Mrs. Thompson, I want to acknowledge something. What you've uncovered here isn't just about your husband. It's about a system that enabled him, family members who stayed silent, professionals who looked the other way, and a culture that taught women like you to be loyal no matter the cost. I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiffs. Mr. Thompson's estate will be liquidated and restitution will be paid to all 4 women. Additionally, I'm referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for potential criminal charges against those who aided in the fraud." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Criminal charges against the living people who'd helped Robert. We walked out of that courtroom, and Susan grabbed my hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not letting this go." But the fight wasn't over. That evening I got a call from Diane. She was crying. "Margaret, please, you've won. You've gotten your money. Can't you just stop now? You're tearing this family apart." I took a deep breath. "Diane, this family was torn apart a long time ago. Robert did that, not me. I'm just the one who finally said it out loud." She hung up. I moved out of the row house 3 months later. My cousin had a guest house on her property in a quieter part of the Boston area, closer to the mobile homes and open sky where I grew up. It was small, just 2 rooms and a tiny kitchen, but it was mine, completely mine. No shared history, no ghosts in the corners, no memories soaked into the walls. The day I moved, Linda helped me pack. We sorted through 43 years of accumulated life, and it was harder than I expected. Every drawer held something that triggered a memory. Every closet revealed another piece of the life I was leaving behind. "Mom, what about these?" Linda held up a stack of birthday cards. From her, from my son, from friends. None from Robert. "Keep the ones from you and your brother," I said. "Throw out the rest." We worked in silence for a while. Then Linda found the box of photos. She sat on the bedroom floor, going through them one by one. Wedding photos, vacation photos, Christmas mornings, 43 years of smiling for cameras. "Do you want any of these?" she asked carefully. I looked down at her, at the photos spread around her on the floor. In every single one, I was smiling. But looking at them now, I could see it wasn't a real smile. It was the smile of someone who'd learned to perform happiness, who'd learned that keeping everyone else comfortable was more important than being authentic. "Keep the ones with you kids in them," I said. "The rest, I don't need them." We sorted through 43 years of accumulated life. Most of it I gave away or threw out. Clothes I'd worn to make Robert happy, dishes we'd gotten as wedding presents, books he'd bought and I'd never read, furniture he'd chosen and I'd arranged and rearranged to suit his preferences. I kept my crossword puzzles, all of them, even the ones I'd never finished. I kept some photos, though not the ones of Robert. Just pictures of my kids, my parents, my sister, the people who'd actually loved me. I kept the forest green dress, even though I'd never wear it again. It was a symbol of something, though I wasn't sure what. Maybe proof that I'd survived those years. Maybe a reminder of who I'd been, so I'd never forget. And I left the ceramic cookie jar in the basement of the old house. I walked down those stairs one last time, placed it on a shelf next to boxes of Robert's things that no one wanted, and walked back up without looking back. Linda watched me close the basement door. "Are you sure you don't want to take it?" It was Grandma's. "It stopped being Grandma's the day I started filling it for him," I said. "It became part of the performance. I don't need it anymore." The guest house had big windows that opened wide in the spring air. I set up a small table by the window where I could do my crossword puzzles and watch the birds. I hung sheets on a new clothesline in the backyard, and every morning I made coffee just for myself, in a mug I'd bought specifically because I liked the color. Bright yellow, with little sunflowers painted on it. Robert would have hated it. He always said yellow was too cheerful, too childish. I loved it. The first few weeks in the new place were strange. I kept waiting for someone to tell me I was doing things wrong, that the coffee was too strong, that I was wasting electricity leaving the lights on, that I was being selfish by reading in bed instead of watching television in the living room. But there was no one. Just me and the quiet and the freedom to arrange my life exactly how I wanted it. I started small. I bought flowers for the kitchen table, bright red tulips that made me smile every time I walked past. I stayed up late reading mystery novels, something Robert had always complained about because the light kept him awake. I ate breakfast for dinner sometimes, scrambled eggs and toast at 7 p.m. just because I could. These tiny rebellions felt enormous. Each one was proof that I was rebuilding myself, piece by piece. David stopped by one afternoon with a folder full of resources. Support groups for abuse survivors, financial planning services for seniors, legal aid information in case anyone else needed help. He stood in my small kitchen, looking around at the bright curtains I'd hung, the flowers on the table, the crossword puzzle I'd left half finished by the window. "This place suits you," he said, smiling. "It feels like you." I realized he was right. After 43 years of living in spaces that reflected Robert's preferences, I'd finally created something that felt like mine. "How are you doing?" he asked, sitting at my small kitchen table. I poured him coffee in one of my cheerful mugs. "I'm doing something I've never done before," I said, sitting across from him. "I'm living for myself. I'm making choices based on what I want, not what someone else expects. And it's terrifying and wonderful at the same time." He smiled, a warm, genuine smile that reminded me why I trusted him. That's all any of us can do, Margaret. Live for ourselves, make our own choices. Trust our own judgment. "I'm 71 years old," I said, "and I'm finally learning how to do that." "Better late than never," he said. "And you're teaching other people that it's possible. That's worth something." Jennifer's article had sparked something bigger than any of us expected. Other women started coming forward with their own stories of financial abuse. Women who'd been told they were bad with money. Women who'd had their paychecks taken. women who'd discovered hidden debts and secret accounts and lies that had lasted decades. A local organization reached out and asked if I'd be willing to speak at their events. Me, Margaret Thompson, who'd spent 43 years staying quiet, speaking publicly about what had happened. I almost said no. The idea of standing in front of strangers and exposing my pain felt impossible. But then I thought about that woman in California who'd written to me, about Susan and Andrea and Marie, about all the women still living the way I'd lived, thinking they were alone. I said yes. The first time I stood in front of a room full of people and told my story, I was terrified. It was a community center, maybe 50 people in folding chairs. Linda came with me for support. She sat in the front row, giving me encouraging nods. My hands shook so badly I had to clasp them together. My voice cracked on the first few words. I'd written notes, but when I looked down at them, the words blurred together. So I just looked up at those faces and started talking. I told them about the ceramic cookie jar, about the crossword puzzles, about 43 years of saying yes when I meant no, about the insurance policy and the court hearing and the slow, painful process of reclaiming myself. As I spoke, I watched the room. Some people were crying, some were nodding along, recognition clear on their faces. Some looked angry, not at me, but at the story, at the injustice of it. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment. Then someone started clapping, then another. Then everyone was standing, applauding, and I felt something break open in my chest. Not grief this time, something else. Pride, maybe, or purpose. I looked out at those faces, at the women nodding along because they recognized themselves in my words, and I knew I was doing the right thing. This pain I'd carried for so long, it could be useful. It could help someone else escape. It could make a difference. I spent 43 years being loyal, I told them. I thought loyalty meant accepting whatever was given to me. I thought it meant never questioning, never pushing back, never saying no. But that's not loyalty. That's erasure. And I'm here to tell you that it's never too late to reclaim yourself. After the talk, women came up to me with tears in their eyes. They told me their own stories. They asked for advice. They thanked me for being brave. I wasn't brave. I was just tired of being silent. One woman, about my age, grabbed my hand and said, "My husband controls all our money. I don't even have my own bank account. How did you find the strength to leave?" I looked at her and said, "I didn't find the strength. I found the anger. And I learned that anger can be a gift if you use it right." I started volunteering with David's organization. Once a week, I'd sit in that office and talk to other seniors who were dealing with financial abuse. I'd help them understand their rights. I'd connect them with lawyers and social workers. I'd tell them they weren't alone. And slowly, piece by piece, I rebuilt myself. It's been a year now since that first court hearing. Spring is here again, windows open, everything coming back to life. I'm sitting in my small guest house, doing a crossword puzzle at my table by the window. 7 letters for freedom, 6 letters for choice. 5 letters for worth. I fill them in without hesitation. Yesterday, I did something I've been thinking about for months. I took the bus to a car dealership, just to look, just to see. And there, in the showroom, was a Genesis G90 in elegant bronze. The same car Robert used to talk about wanting. The car he said we could never afford because we had to be practical. I didn't buy it, but I sat in it. I ran my hands over the steering wheel, and I imagined what it would feel like to drive it. Not because Robert wanted it, but because I wanted to know what it felt like to want something expensive and impractical just for myself. The salesman asked if I was interested. I said maybe someday. He gave me his card. I put it in my purse and took the bus home, smiling the whole way. Last week, Susan called me. She'd gotten her portion of the restitution and had used it to go back to school. At 68 years old, she was getting a degree in social work. "I want to help other women," she said, "like you helped me." Andrea had moved to another state, started over completely. Marie had reconnected with her daughter after years of estrangement. We were all rebuilding, all of us choosing to turn our pain into something useful. I think about Robert sometimes, not with love anymore, but not with hate either, just with this strange sense of understanding. He was broken in ways I'll never fully comprehend, and he broke me because broken people break people. But I'm not broken anymore. I'm healing, and that's a choice I make every single day. The legal settlements came through last month. After Patricia's fees and the restitution to the other women, I still had enough to live comfortably. I put some in savings. I donated some to organizations that help abuse survivors. And I kept some just to spend on things I want, not need, want, like the subscription to the crossword puzzle magazine I never let myself buy before, like the fancy coffee I drink every morning, like the trip to Maine I'm planning for next month to visit my sister. Small things, but they're mine. I've learned that rebuilding a life isn't about grand gestures, it's about small daily choices. Choosing to wake up, choosing to eat something I like, choosing to speak when I used to stay silent, choosing to trust myself over anyone else's version of reality. David told me something a few months ago that stuck with me. He said, "Margaret, you know what you are? You're a survivor. But more than that, you're a teacher. You're showing other people that it's possible to escape even when the abuser is dead and the damage seems permanent." I didn't feel like a teacher. I felt like someone who'd wasted most of her life and was trying to make the remaining years count for something. But maybe that's the same thing. Today is Sunday. I'm sitting in the back pew of the church again, after everyone has left. But this time, I'm not holding that funeral home fan with confusion and grief. I'm holding it with clarity, with understanding. I come here sometimes, to this empty church, because it's quiet, because I can think, because I can look back at the woman I was a year ago and see how far I've come. There's something I need people to understand, especially people who are going through what I went through. Something David taught me that changed everything. It's about the enablers, the flying monkeys, he called them, the people around the abuser who either help them or stay silent. In my case, it was Sarah, who knew about the insurance fraud for years and said nothing. It was Diane, who defended Robert even after seeing the evidence. It was George, the accountant, who helped hide money. It was the friends who looked the other way when Robert was with other women. It was my own daughter, who signed documents without questioning. They weren't the abusers, but they made the abuse possible. And here's what I've learned. You can't heal from abuse if you're still surrounded by enablers. You have to identify them. You have to understand their role. And you have to create distance. Sarah has apologized repeatedly. She wants a relationship now. And maybe someday we'll have one. But not yet. Not until I'm sure I'm strong enough to not fall back into old patterns. Diane will never apologize. She's still telling anyone who'll listen that I destroyed her brother's memory. I've accepted that. Some people need their illusions more than they need the truth. The flying monkeys in your life will try to convince you to stay quiet, to forgive, to move on for the sake of family unity. But family unity built on silence about abuse isn't unity. It's complicity. I wish someone had told me that 43 years ago. There are statistics that haunt me now. Global studies estimate that 142 million seniors suffer abuse worldwide. 142 million. That's more people than live in this entire country. And most of us are silent. Most of us are ashamed. Most of us blame ourselves. But there's something else David showed me. Studies reveal that having 4 or more traumas increases the risk of depression 4 to 12 times. 4 to 12 times. I had the psychological abuse for decades. I had the financial theft. I had the death of my husband. I had the discovery of his crimes. I had the betrayal of his family. I had the public exposure of my private pain. That's more than 4 traumas. Way more. And you know what? I should be drowning in depression right now according to those statistics. But I'm not. Because I got help. Because I spoke up. Because I found people like David and Patricia and Jennifer who believed me and helped me fight back. If you're listening to this right now and you see yourself in my story, please hear me. You're not alone. You're not crazy. You're not too sensitive or too demanding or too anything. You're being abused. And it's not your fault. And there is a way out. It might not be easy. It might mean losing people you love. It might mean facing truths you've been avoiding for years. It might mean sitting on a bathroom floor crying until you can't breathe. But on the other side of that pain is something I never thought I'd have again. Peace. Real peace. The kind that comes from knowing you're living in truth instead of lies. I look at that ceramic cookie jar sometimes, sitting in a box in my storage closet. I haven't thrown it away. Maybe someday I will. Or maybe I'll keep it as a reminder of what I survived. Either way, it doesn't control me anymore. Last week, I got a letter from a woman in California who'd read Jennifer's article online. She said her husband had been doing the same things to her. Gaslighting, financial control, making her feel crazy. She said she'd been thinking about leaving, but was scared. I wrote back. I told her everything I wished someone had told me. About getting a lawyer, about documenting everything, about finding a social worker or advocate, about the court system and restitution and standing up for yourself even when everyone tells you to stay quiet. I don't know if she'll leave, that's her choice. But at least now she knows it's possible. I've started thinking about writing a book. David thinks it's a good idea. Jennifer offered to help. Linda said she'd support me. The book would be about all of this, about loyalty and sacrifice and the difference between love and control, about the long process of reclaiming yourself after decades of erasure. I don't know if anyone would read it, but I think I need to write it anyway. For me, for that woman in California, for the 142 million seniors suffering in silence, for every person who's been told their pain doesn't matter because the abuser is dead or because family unity is more important than truth. Your pain matters. Your truth matters. You matter. I'm 71 years old, and I'm finally learning that. Finally believing it. And if I can learn it after 43 years of being told otherwise, anyone can. The church is getting dark now. I should head home. I have a crossword puzzle waiting for me. And tomorrow morning, I'm taking the bus somewhere new again. Maybe to that park with the ducks. Maybe to the library. Maybe just to ride it to the end of the line and back. Because I can. Because it's my choice. Because my life is finally mine. Have you lived this? Do you know someone who has? If this story touched you, please share it. Not for me, but for the person out there who needs to hear it as desperately as I needed to 43 years ago. Like and subscribe so this message reaches them, so they know they're not alone, so they know it's never too late to choose yourself. Because it's not too late. It's never too late. I know, I'm living proof.